I am the patron of the foundation. I'm also the patron of the Orwell Society as well.
Same goals for both, or same mission for both?
Same mission, different approach.
What is the approach?
For the foundation, the approach is through the Orwell Awards and the Orwell Youth Prize. It is run by trustees with people who are working on what I would call the coalface, who do all literally the hard work during the day. The Orwell Society is run by a committee of trustees, of which I am one. And what we do is we have members, we have about over 600 members, and our mission is to take our members to those places that Orwell was associated with, places like Spain, places like Jura, where he wrote 1984, and we also go to Marrakesh, where he and Eileen, my mother, spent 6 months, and where he wrote his last novel, not the 1984 and Animal Farm, but the previous last novel. And also to other odd places that are still associated. My father never really had a house of his own, and so was always on the move, as it were.
That was his nature, do you think, or was it circumstances?
I think it was circumstances to some extent. He would have, had he survived, I think he would have settled on the island of Jura, certainly for the summertime. He would have probably had to have gone abroad to somewhere warm, but I think he had, in his mind, I think he had settled on his island in the Hebrides, as he calls it.
You lived with him then there when you were a child, didn't you?
Yes, I'm aware of living with him in London in Canonbury Square, which was his last flat, as a very little boy. I cannot think why I remembered, but there are certain flashbacks. But it was only in 1946 that we moved to the island of Jura, and so there was my father, myself, and he invited his younger sister Avril to come and join us, and she ran the house, looked after the house. And so essentially there was just the three of us, and I loved it there. It was a fantastic place. You could do anything you liked. You just opened the back door and out you go. Hell, there was about 20,000 acres you'd roam over. That was part of the estate, never mind the rest of Jura. But he, having gone to Jura, he had said, I must get away, London's very grey, and I must write this book which I have in mind. And I need peace and quiet. There are too many distractions in London. People are always asking me to write this, write an article for that. I must get away. So what does he do when he gets to Jura? He invites all his friends to come to Jura. And he says, and I quote, this is a most unget-atable place, was Jura. It would take you 2 days to get there from London. It takes you damn nearly 2 days to get there now. But it was a fantastic, it was a lovely farmhouse, not old-fashioned in the sense, but it was furnished of the time, and it was wind and watertight, and we lived extremely well, because in those, of course, in the wartime we had rationing, so you had to have a ration book. And we, of course, had to get our rations, as everybody else did, but we had access to fish, any amounts, lobsters, crabs, and the odd haunch of venison would appear our way, rabbits, which he shot. So although we lived very simply, we lived very well.
An idyllic spot for a young boy.
Yes, it was. It was just to go out and play anywhere you liked. The only thing that worried my father was snakes, strange enough, because Jura is, or has, a lot of snakes. They're only adders, they're not one bite and you're dead. The one bite and you might feel a bit ill. But he was obsessed by snakes, I suppose, because of his experience in Burma. So he did say in one of his letters, I must buy Richard a stout pair of boots because of the snakes.
How many of the letters have you been through?
I confess, well, apart from all the printed ones in the 20 volumes, the 25, 50 letters that I rescued a few years ago, I have to say I've not actually, I must sit down, I've got all the photocopies in my study, I must sit down and start reading the damn things. These letters were to his 2 girlfriends.
And what did you discover in the letters? I mean, what picture did you get of your father?
A lot of the letters are actually really quite simple, straightforward descriptions of there wasn't a great deal of abstract thought and anything particularly profound in his letters. They were just day-to-day things that happened, or you might pass a comment about, depending who he was writing to, he might pass a comment about what was going on politically as it happened.
I would think most people don't think of George Orwell necessarily as a romantic figure.
No, I suppose you wouldn't, but he liked women very much. And he liked strong-willed women. He liked women who had something to say and weren't afraid to say it. He didn't like just some woman from the village or something. He liked women who were opinionated and he could have an argument with.
He seemed to seek out women who were always, quote unquote, his intellectual equal.
Yes, and his wife, Eileen, was certainly his intellectual equal.
This was the woman he was married to when you were adopted?
Yes.
Yes. You have no memory of her. She died less than a year.
No, sadly, I have no memory. There are obviously letters which I've read, very interesting. She had a very, very dry sense of humor. Like my father, she had a dry sense of humor and quite a wicked sense of humor. And it was said in such a way that, you missed it. And you think, hang on, I'll go back and read that again. And you sort of, get the humor. Because she was Irish by birth. And the Irish are a bit like that. You listen to an Irishman and you think, what the hell is he talking about? And then you realise, I never met an Irishman yet that could talk in a straight line.
Do you wish after reading the letters, do you wish you had known her?
Of course. It was tragic. I have to, in all honesty, I think both of them did not look after their health. They both had problems and were not addressed as they should have been, or would have been were they in today's medical atmosphere.
Do you think that they were so focused on, I hate to call it the career, but on the writing that they neglected?
He was, certainly. And she was focused on looking after him and had put her career to one side. Although, of course, she did work in the Ministry of Food in the BBC during the war. But, she suffered from a lot of gynecological problems during the war. And I don't think she did enough about it to correct it. She always thought, oh, I'll do it sometime, I'll do it sometime. And when she did do it sometime, it was too late.
She died from an allergic reaction?
Well, she went into a hospital in Newcastle upon Tyne, to have a hysterectomy, because that was essentially what the problem was. But she was also very anemic, and I don't think a really responsible surgeon would have touched her until she had brought her blood levels up. I don't think the surgeon who did operate on her was at fault per se, but I think he took a little bit of a chance, and when they gave her the anaesthetic, she died on the operating table. And that's when my father had already gone to Germany to report for David Astor, his great friend, to report on the end of the war. And of course he got a telegram, Eileen's died, he'd come back, so he had to come back, make arrangements for the funeral, and make arrangements for me.
Were there anything in either of their letters that talked about their adoption of you and what it meant to them at all?
Yeah, he'd always said that he'd wanted a family. In that sense, he was very conventional. And he said, but he always felt he couldn't have children. He thought he was infertile. And so he thought, well, the next best thing is an adoption. And he persuaded Eileen that to adopt a child. She was very, very ambivalent about it. She wasn't sure whether she could bond with someone else's child. And I think the problem was that she couldn't have children either. So whether he was infertile or not, I don't know. There's certainly no little Orwells running around from elsewhere. So this was in 1942-43. He would have been talking about, certainly seriously with Eileen, about the possibility of adopting a child, which I think was possibly one of the reasons. It's not written down as such, but one of the reasons maybe why he left the BBC. He says the reason, or it's reported that the reason why he left the BBC was that he felt that he didn't think he was being listened to in India, which is where the broadcasts were going. Of course, it was very difficult to judge whether they were getting any reception or not. So that's one of the reasons why he resigned. But I think the other reason is that he wanted to. I think he wanted to settle down. He had a book in mind and to adopt a child and complete his family.
The book was?
Which was Animal Farm, of course.
And he wrote that at about the same time that you were adopted? Yes,
more or less. One of the things he did was when he was writing, is that when he came back from the BBC, the only warm place was bed. So he would sit up in bed, as far as I could work out. And he would have written a chapter at some stage, or had written some, and they would sit and discuss it. And I think she made quite a lot of recommendations, suggestions, thoughts, which is why I think Animal Farm is, when you read it compared with his other books, it has a much lighter touch to it. All right, it is a fairy story, but nevertheless, there is, I think she had suggested that he ought to make it into a fairy story of some sort. And so her input was very much appreciated by him, and that's how Animal Farm turned out.
It has elements of what you described before as the Irish wit.
Yeah, if you want to, the Irish wit comes out when they were in Marrakesh, when he was writing Coming Up for Air, and she writes this wonderful letter to her friend about sitting in the restaurant, and when a body goes past in a shroud, all the flies leave the restaurant, and about 10 minutes later they all come back again. You know, it's just the way she phrases it, and it's just, you just sit there and you can't help but laugh.
Do you think she deserves more credit for Animal Farm than she's gotten?
I think so. I think she should be slightly more than a footnote.
Any idea what she should, obviously not, well, I shouldn't say obviously, not a co-author or?
No, it wouldn't, not a co-author, but just, I don't know how you put it, with help, or dedicated to my wife, Eileen, whose help was immeasurable.
At the time that you were adopted, he spoke somewhat glowingly of being a father. He almost seemed happy while he was also writing Animal Farm. There's kind of a dichotomy there.
No, because he was quite happy. He would separate one from t'other quite easily. His domestic world was his domestic world. His writing world was his secret, not secretly, but privately in his bedroom or wherever. But certainly as a writer, he always used to say that a day not writing was a day wasted. His output was enormous. I mean, we're looking at Animal Farm in 1904 are just two very small items of his output, total output. I mean, he had another seven books prior to that, but also all the essays, the criticism, the notes that he took, why I write, all these articles that he wrote, not insatiably in the sense that he was writing every day, and he felt no writing was not a good day. Although having said that, he did spend a lot of time not writing. I mean, when he liked gardening. When he lived in 1936 in Wallington, down in England near in Hertfordshire, and trying to get his garden going, he rented this cottage called the Stores. I describe it. It had a cold water tap in the house, but no other facilities. The other facilities were in the bottom of the garden. But I always describe it as a house. It did have running water down all four walls. It was that kind of place. But he didn't look for luxury. He never asked for luxury. He didn't want luxury. It was a complete anathema to him. So long as he was comfortable, he was comfortable. He was quite happy just living in whatever circumstances he found himself in.
Your mother would have appreciated the water running down all four walls line. That's a little bit of the Irish wit there too.
Yeah, like a hole in the head.
Yeah. Did your father consider himself a novelist or a journalist or both, or did he not make the distinction?
Yes. He did both, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Well, I don't know. I suppose you have to view him as both, really. It depends what he was writing. I mean, if he was writing, as he did, down and out in Paris and London, that was really a sort of a travelogue, as it were. The Road to Wigan Pier, Homage to Catalonia. These were his experiences as a journalist. As an author, of course, were his novels. So, whichever way you want to look at it.
What do you consider him as?
I consider him as an author who was very good at journalism.
Even 1984 and Animal Farm almost have a journalistic feel, even though obviously they're fiction.
Yeah, well, it's the way it's written, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
It's one man's view into the world of Animal Farm.
Let's go back to his early life. Father stationed, for want of a better term, in India, grew up with his mother in England. Finance is always a consideration.
He describes himself as the upper lower middle class. Upper class because that's what he aspired to. Lower class because it didn't have two halfpennies rubbed together, or 2 cents. And middle class because that's actually how they were brought up, in the middle class sort of atmosphere of the colonial system.
Which was not just a financial situation, but it was a way of mind also.
It's a way of mind, yes. They never really had, the family never really had a lot of money, but they seemed to, so they never bought anything, they always rented their houses. And I suppose they found that was the best way to, see, in those days that's what you did. You didn't buy your house, you rented it.
Scholarship student?
Scholarships, well, of course, when he went to his prep school, St Cyprian's, down in the south coast, at Eastbourne, he was obviously a clever boy, because he'd already been to a little local school on Shipston on Thames, and his mother obviously realised he was probably quite bright, and I think she managed to get him into this school in the sense that the school thought they may have something here. They may have a scholarship boy whom they could bring on. So he went there on half fees, which they could just about marriage because father was still in this Indian civil service. Although by that time, of course, he had come back. He had been in the First World War. But I guess he had a sort of pension. I wouldn't know how much it was. Reasonable pension for the time. And there were sufficient funds to send him to prep school on the off chance that he would win a scholarship to a better school, which of course he did. And that's why he went to, well, he didn't go to Eton immediately. He went to another school first for a term because there wasn't sufficient room at Eton for him. But it was just for a term. So Eton was his school that he went to, his alma mater.
Do you know where the ambition came from, the drive, the work ethic?
I don't. It's interesting. I think really because the only thing that drove him, of course, was reading. I mean, he did no work. Once he'd got his scholarship from his prep school and ended up in Eton, he didn't do a stroke of work. Not a Scooby. But he did read, and he read voraciously. He read everything he could lay his hands on. He was very, very well versed in nature. That was due to his summer visits down to a family place down on the south coast, in Cornwall, a little village called Polperro. And I think he was curious. He had a very curious mind, and he just wanted to learn about all sorts of things. And I think that's where it came in. And when he came back from Burma and went to his parents' new house in Southwold in 1927, he said, "I'm giving up my time with the Burmese police force, my commission. I want to be a writer. I will be a writer." And that was his burning ambition, was to write. So there was something in there that compelled him to write.
Do you have any idea whether your grandparents welcomed that idea, or were they horrified that he...
Oh, they're horrified. Why give up a good job with a pension and a steady income to go and be a writer? You've got to be nuts, haven't you?
He didn't care, though.
Nope. He just ploughed on.
It was, I guess, during those years where he was kind of inculcated with what we call wealth disparity nowadays, the rich and versus the poor.
I don't think it really bothered him a great deal.
He does seem focused on poverty, though. I mean,
he is focused on poverty. When he was in Paris, he did say, when you're in the gutter, there is only one way to go, and that's up. And he often described himself, I'm upper lower middle class. I don't think he made a fetish of it, as far as I know. But did he resent being poor? Can't say. I don't think so particularly. Money wasn't really what he wasn't aiming to make a huge amount of money, which is ironic really, given after his death. But that's by the by.
Oh, did he resent that other people were poor? Not necessarily himself, but he was doing it for the greater good.
He resented the way the Great Britain treated other countries that they were in charge of during the British Empire. And that was one of the reasons why he gave up being a policeman, because he saw the iniquity of the way that the system worked. And that's why he then reverted to being what he called being an old-fashioned socialist. He liked to see people more or less not equal, but kind of rubbing along together. A bit utopian, I suppose, because it doesn't work that way. but you've got to start from somewhere, and that was his attitude. And I think that's perfectly acceptable. When he went to Paris, he did his tramping in London first, and then he went to Paris to do what all writers do, go to Paris and live in some grotty garret somewhere and write. Unfortunately, when he went there, of course, he had all his money stolen, so that put him in a bit of a pickle. So he had to get a job as a plongeur in a hotel, which he does not tell us which one it is, but it's obviously one of the better ones, where he describes what the conditions are like in the kitchen. I don't suppose they're any different to any other good quality hotels in Paris or London or Washington or New York or anywhere else for that matter.
He does realize at that point, though, how difficult it is to work your way out of extreme poverty.
Yes, that's what he's saying. You know, when you're at the bottom, it's very difficult to get out of that poverty spiral, to work your way up. And he really related to people who were caught in that trap. Very often he met people when he was tramping around London in what they call the spikes. These were the hostels that the homeless people used to go to. He met people who had good jobs, but through circumstances, either divorce or lost their job or whatever, had found themselves in a situation. And he said they found it very difficult to get back out again, because if you went to an interview and they said, well, what did you do before? Well, actually, I was made redundant or whatever. I've got no home. Oh, well, we don't need to know you, and that's what bothered him, I think.
Was your father prescient? I mean, did he really see all of this coming, or was he just a great student of human nature?
Yeah, interesting question, isn't it? I think he was very prescient in his ability to read what was going on in the world. What he understood, of course, is that man's ability to conquer man has something that's gone on since day one, and it just goes on, and it will carry on doing so. It's all around us. And I think that's what he latched onto, and that's what he was doing. He was trying to warn us about people who want to take control of us in some way or another with misinformation. It doesn't matter whether it's left or right. For you and me, it's in the middle. It's still the same, isn't it? And that's what he was trying to tell us about. He said, be aware of the way that people are being manipulated and maneuvered. So I think he just felt it irritated him, the way that people treated each other.
You had said before he was a socialist. At some point, especially with Animal Farm, he certainly skewered Soviet communism and really totalitarianism, fascism, and everything else. But he had become totally disillusioned at that point.
He became disillusioned. I think to some extent, he became disillusioned, or the seeds of disillusionment was sown in Burma when he realized the way that the British Empire treated its subjects. But that was reinforced when he went to Spain, and he joined this group called the POUM, which was a Trotskyist organization, and because he kind of thought about communism, was it good, bad, or indifferent? But then he found out how the Russians, how Moscow, how Stalin was started to treat people, and the totalitarianism of the regime, which turned into terror. And that was what he really, really understood, and always said that everything I have written since afterwards was against totalitarianism, because it really, when he was there, he was hunted by the NKVD, and had he been caught with his wife.
He would have certainly been put to death. She managed to get the passage, though, right? The right stuff.
Yes, in the hotel in Barcelona, where she lived, because she worked for a bloke from the Independent Labour Party. The problem was, my father had, by this time, had a huge amount of notes, diaries, photographs, journalism, so on and so forth, which he was looking after. And the NKVD came round and raided the hotel room. And fortunately, they took all this stuff, but she was in bed and she was sitting on the passports. And the nice Spanish policeman did not ask her to get out of bed. And so they rescued their passports, which allowed them to get out of Spain.
God bless chivalry, huh?
Indeed. I mean, the Spanish police were there, obviously, with the NKVD officers. So they were damn lucky, because had that not happened, they would have been picked up straight away and interrogated, and he would have been shot.
He was shot in Spain, though, wasn't he?
He was. When he was in a little town about 200 miles west of Barcelona called Huesca. He was in a trench one morning, and it was so devised that the dawn was behind him. And this was early in the morning, cold as charity, but he stood up to give take over the guard and give some instruction, blah, blah, blah. And a sniper further away, towards the dark, saw this tall, shadowy figure standing up a little bit in the light, and took a shot at him. And the bullet went right through his neck, missing everything on the way through. I would suggest that anybody who was hit by a standard NATO 7.62 round would have a very, very sore throat, to the point of total destruction. But he was damn lucky. He said, being shot is interesting, he said. It's a bit like being the center of an explosion. And that just about sums it up.
So he was actually a journalist at his own...
At his own, nearly at his own death, yes. Because obviously what he was doing, he was writing notes about what was happening in Spain, not only taking part in the war, in the trenches and so on and so forth, and explaining what it was like, which was bloody awful. And not as very often in war, it's 9/10 boredom, 1/10 terror, and that's roughly what it was. So it's no different. Was no different for him as it was for anybody else. So when he was wounded, he then was taken back behind the lines, and was shoveled down the lines, and eventually ended up back in Barcelona, and sent to a place called the Marin Sanatorium, where he was recovered, and got all his faculties back. He was left with a bit of a weak voice, but otherwise he was okay. He made an interesting comment at the time. My wife will be pleased that, I've got a war wound and I'm still alive. Someone also said to him, gosh, you were lucky, weren't you? I said, not really. I would prefer not to have been shot.
There's no evidence that it was Hemingway in the ambulance corps who pulled him out of there.
Oh, no, I don't think so. No, I think, no.
There's no evidence to the contrary either, though, so...
No, I don't, well, no. Not, unless someone says yes, we will assume the answer is no.
What do you think he would make of all of the technology oligarchs nowadays? Would he view this as the ultimate Big Brother?
What's going on today?
Yes. The Facebook and the Meta and the Palantir
Well, it's not the end of all this, is it?
Yeah.
This will carry on developing. And in 20, 30, 40, 100 years' time, it'll be something different. So what would you have made of it? Well, of course, the short answer is I have absolutely no idea. Because, you know, as they say, when you flatline, all bets are off. The question is also, would he have said, well, I told you so? And I suppose to a degree there is something in that thought, is that, you know, he could see what was happening. It's the control of one person over another, and that will never go away.
But he also understood that the advancement of technology made that even more possible?
Well, I presume so. It's having written about the telescreen and the system for speaking, you know, right. The technology was not far off the mark. Two-way screens, that sort of thing. It's slightly uncanny. So from that point of view, it was quite prescient.
But he would reject being thought of as a science fiction writer and like a Jules Verne.
I think, no, I don't think he would like to be thought of that. He would much prefer to be thought of as a writer.
So he was a reporter who was able to predict the future in a way.
But I just think he understood technology. And I think he could see that technology was going that way. I mean, after all, 1984 was simply a novel, a dystopian novel. But there was enough information that he would have had access to get a hold of and be able to advance it on. I mean, there was television had been invented by then, so he simply took television and kind of took it on to another level, which was the level at which we then advanced it to.
One of his contemporaries, Huxley in Brave New World, they all kind of saw what was coming, and they all tried to warn in a way, didn't they?
Yes, they did. I found Huxley intensely difficult to read. He's been left behind a bit, I think. The only other person, Orwell was the one who's still advancing, you know, last man standing.
Well, he's still used as a...
He's used as a reference.
Yes.
In almost everyday speech, writing. There isn't a paper you can't open that doesn't have something Orwellian in it.
What has it been like for you being the son, the man who's, especially since he died while you were so young, trying to piece this all together and then do interviews like this where you're trying to contextualize
it's been part of my life, hasn't it? It didn't really start until about 1980, the old interviews. Prior to that, I was working, you know, and keeping a low profile and out the way.
How old were you when your aunt, your father's sister, told you?
She told me I was adopted about one day, quite out of the blue. We were driving somewhere, and I must have been about 7 or 8, and or maybe near 8, yeah, about 8. She just said, "Oh, by the way, you were adopted by your father." And I said, "Yeah, okay."
Did you know who he was at that point? Did you know his role in?
I probably not. That sort of slowly dawned on me as time went on, and you hear different stories from different people about Orwell this and so forth, and so and so was talking about Orwell, and that person was talking about Orwell. Well, what are these people talking about my father? So that's how it built up, and then of course I started reading him. I read Animal Farm at the age of 11, 12, And I thought, because somebody said, I think either my aunt or her husband, Uncle Bill, suggested it, but you ought to start thinking about reading some of your father's stuff. Having read Animal Farm, I then thought about, well, perhaps I'll try 1984. But they said, no, leave 1984 for a year or two, because it's a much more difficult book to read and to understand. But once I had read it, and then over teenage years, then later, I read them all.
What was your initial reaction when you read it? Not in terms of the book itself, but in terms of, oh my gosh, this is my father.
A little bit, I suppose. Well, it would have to be, wouldn't it? I thought, yeah, right. This is my father talking here.
Did you understand what he was trying to say?
I think I found 1984 quite hard to put together. Animal Farm was easy enough by then. The other books, I probably missed some of the nuances in there that I've since picked up over the years. The one thing I have picked up on the book is his incredible ability. He was a wonderful essay writer. And every book he wrote, you will find an essay in there that you could pull out as a separate piece of writing. And they're always interesting. I mean, if you read, it doesn't matter whether it's Homage to Catalonia or The Road to Wigan Pier or Clergyman's Daughter, there is something, a piece of information that's that you can use separately and write about.
What do you make of it that, particularly in the United States, which is obviously where I'm more familiar with, that certain school districts now have banned some of his books?
Yeah, that's a shame, isn't it? Why? Well, the answer to that, of course, is they think it's. I do wonder why. What's it going to do? It's not going to kill the children, for God's sake. It gives them something to think about. But I suppose that the authorities are thinking this is a bit dark, bit too left-wing, right-wing, call it what you like. Perhaps the children shouldn't be reading this sort of thing. It's probably a little bit below them. And the other problem, of course, is now we're going into all these apps and with mobile phones, all this, and our attention span has now gone from 20 minutes to 20 seconds at best. And a lot of people, as I understand it, a lot of youngsters can't cope with reading a book. Certainly in the UK, I don't know what it's like anywhere else. It all has to be sound bites. That's the way it's working. So they're thinking, why do we have to give them books? I'm not suggesting that's universal. I go around schools in this country, and I'm amazed at I get a bit not annoyed, but I think, oh God, what bloody kids! They're not they're not being allowed to do this, that, and the other. But I've seen them, and they've come up with, they've been given something, Orwell to talk about or write about, and I think, well, your brain's working, boy or girl. You're not that silly, and I think we have to be aware that youngsters are not that silly, and they do know what was going on, and I think they're being misled by not being allowed to think a little bit more for themselves.
The books are neither left-wing nor right-wing, are they? There's almost no political stance.
Not particularly. Well, certainly the novels aren't. No. They are novels for entertainment, reading. They're a bit weak, some of them, but some people have thought the plot line is a bit odd, but that's by the by.
Why is Orwell still relevant today?
Well, that is because what he predicted in the 40s and the 50s are still there, still around us. He just predicted the misinformation that goes on and the surveillance that goes on. And it's got worse and worse. So from that point of view, he's still relevant. And the misuse of language, not only the misuse of information, but misuse of language, the way that bulletins are put out about something, it's they're trying to kind of, whoever's putting it out, I'm trying to put a spin on it to make it not quite so bad. And that was one of the things that he was warning us against, of all this being led in one particular way or the other.
But despite all the warnings, we've still arrived to where we are today.
In spite of all the warnings, yes. Well, not even my father could move the world in his direction. That is not possible. But he just wanted to let us know, be aware of what's going on. He didn't appear to give us any solutions as to how you get out of it, which to some extent, of course, when these books were, and forgive me for saying so, when they were published in the States, the reading audience wanted some sort of solution at the end of the book, but there was no solution, not one that would be a happy one or whatever. It's something that was ongoing all the time. Although in Animal Farm, I mean, what happened was, of course, the bloody farm went back to where it was before, because the experiment was crap. It didn't work, and it knew, and everybody knows it wasn't going to work, because that's how human nature works. In 1984, we have at the end, of course, with Julia, and they accept what's. And I'm trying to think of the coda that they had in. I have to start reading it again, but Julia at the end and Winston accept the status quo, don't they?
Which is somewhat bleak.
It appears to be bleak, but in the coda, it is now talking about what happened before, and we're now going back into what happened before that, and that this was a period of time where it didn't work, where the world of Big Brother finally collapses, and we're going back into some sort of near normality.
And at the end of the day, it's really human nature that drives everything still.
It is, yes.
And there's no antidote for that.
I'm afraid not. The antidote is to not, again, I'm saying this, and I've repeated it time and time again, be aware. Be aware of what's going on. Because, you know, we misinformation, you can be pulled in by misinformation, and you think, well, that's true. Actually, it's not. That's what somebody wants you to believe.
But be aware.
But again, in spite of that, a lot of people aren't aware of what it could be, because they've lost out somewhere in the past in their education the warning signs to look out for. So they read this, think, oh, well, that's all. If that's what it says, that's what it must be.
Jefferson had said that you get the government you deserve. Would your father have agreed with that, do you think?
Yeah, probably.
So at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the people of a nation.
It's the responsibility of the people to keep a lookout for what's going on and try and correct it if they think it's going in the wrong direction. All this information that comes out from governments, this misinformation. I mean, it's wonderful listening to them. I listen in the morning. What is it? Oh, please. Come on. Who are you trying to kid?
Which one would your father have said, I don't approve of it, but that's a really good line?
in the sense of misinformation.
Misinformation, yes, or Ministry of Truth, or any of that sort of stuff.
Oh, I can't conjure up her. You hear it all the time, but there's not one that actually sticks in my mind. I mean, I suppose, forgive me again, was Kellyanne's Conway's comment about the election in 2016. There were more people here than there were at Obama's election. No, there were a whole lot more at Obama's election in Washington. Well, actually, it was quite funny because I thought that Trump was my bestest friend because the sales of 1984 went up 6,000%.
Now, was it sold as a way to understand what was happening, or as a primer, as a manual?
I think well, I think when she said that, everyone goes, "Pardon? Where have I heard that before?" Orwell. I better go back and read 1984 to find out, is that correct? And yes, that is the way the world works.
Has the White House contacted you and asked for a percentage of the sales increase?
Not yet. Not now, not ever.
Thank you very much, sir.